Hello guys, I've been looking for topics to talk about this week and I've ran across a very suspicious set of disappearances coming from the Connecticut area. Law enforcement has been investigating a case known as the Vernon-Tolland Three. An investigative squad for the case was created in October of 2014. The Vernon-Tolland Three case revolves around the mysterious disappearances of three girls from Connecticut. The first girl who disappeared was Debbie Spickler, and she vanished in 1968, followed by Janice Pockett, who disappeared in 1973. And lastly, we have Lisa White, who also vanished in 1974. After investigating each case as a standalone, the authorities now look at all of these three cases as potentially connected. This is a change in tactics that will hopefully bring results faster. Former Connecticut Governor Daniel Malloy has authorized rewards in each case, making the grand total of $150,000 for information about Debbie, Janice, or Lisa that would lead to an arrest and conviction of those responsible for these three crimes. Before we delve deeper into these individual cases and the connecting factors, I guess, I would like to mention that if you have any information in any of these three disappearances, please call the Cold Case Squad tip line or use the email. You can find the tip line and the email in the description of this episode. Right, so let's jump right to the first girl who disappeared, and this was 13-year-old Debbie Spickler. She vanished on July 24th back in 1968. At the time she went missing, she was actually visiting her aunt and uncle in the town of Vernon in Connecticut, but she was actually originally from another town lower down south. It's called Mystic. She was last seen at Henry Park in the 100 block of South Street on July 24th, 1968. According to the International Missing Persons Wikipedia, that you can also find online, she was walking from Fox Hill Drive to the park's swimming pool area with a female cousin. Once the girls arrived to the pool area, they realized that they had forgotten to bring towels, so Debbie's female cousin left to get some. But when she returned to the pool area, she could no longer locate Debbie anywhere, and Debbie was essentially lost. Interesting fact, I'm not really sure if it plays a role in this case, but on the same day that Debbie vanished, her mother actually received a birthday card, and the card was from Debbie. And Debbie had written that she was being good and helping her aunt. I would assume she probably sent this birthday card to her mother, who was probably living back in Mystic. Let's remember that Debbie at this point was just visiting her aunt in the town of Vernon. At the time of her disappearance, Debbie was wearing a white sleeveless shirt, homemade dark green polka dot shorts with no pockets, and some white low-top sneakers. Debbie's distinguishing characteristics include that she was a white female, she had brown hair, she had brown eyes as well. Debbie had pock marks, or a pock mark on her face. One of her teeth is chipped. NamUs, the forensic service that is essentially there for investigative support in order to resolve missing persons and unidentified remains cases, has her dental records on file as well as her DNA. Debbie's case number with the Vernon police is C3710 68 J. The second girl, part of the Vernon-Tolland Three, is 7-year-old Janice Pockett, who went missing on July 26th in 1973. So the same month as Debbie Spickler. However, this is happening 5 years later, and it's worth mentioning that Debbie was quite a bit older at the time of her disappearance. She was 13, while Janice was 7. When I was investigating the Vernon-Tolland Three case, the most amount of information I was able to gather was regarding Janice's disappearance. I've even listened to a radio show shortly before recording where Janice's younger sister came on the show and she described, basically her fight to find answers. And I believe they were promoting some sort of promotional event for the missing girls of Connecticut. And it was very interesting to listen to because this case happened many years ago, back in 73, and even as recently as like just the last few years, people are still trying to find information regarding these 3 disappearances. Janice was last seen leaving her family's home on Anthony Road in Tolland, Connecticut on July 26, 1973. She planned to ride her bicycle, which had a bell and a banana seat, to find a dead butterfly she had found 2 days before her disappearance while on a family walk. Janice put the butterfly behind a rock, which was visible from the middle of the street in front of her home. This was actually the first time she'd been allowed to go out by herself, but she was told to come back very soon. She never arrived home and has never been seen again. The lead up to this disappearance is pretty peculiar. More light was shed by Janice's younger sister on that radio show that I've listened to regarding how this whole thing went down. So apparently the family had some sort of a walk where Janice found a dead butterfly, or she captured the butterfly, and her younger sister said that she and Janice really liked like capturing toads and little insects, things of that nature. And she specifically remembers that Janice actually placed this dead butterfly that she either captured or found under a rock. And so let's forward 2 days in advance. On the day when Janice disappeared, she actually had some sort of a fight with her younger sister, and I think their mother was a little bit frustrated, and in order to separate the 2 girls, she told Janice that, yeah, you could go locate that butterfly, but come back home right after. I think this was like some sort of a way of separating the 2 girls. And Janice's younger sister also said that their mother really regretted and had to basically live with this really dark, idea that basically your decision kind of led to this disappearance. Obviously, it's not her fault, of course, but just FYI, wanted to shed some more light about the whole the whole, let's say, premise, what's happening in Janice's disappearance. When Janice didn't arrive back home within maybe like 20 minutes or something like that, Janice's mother found her bike half an hour later on Rhodes Road near a wooded area less than a mile from her residence. I have to mention that right before Janice left to retrieve this butterfly, her mother gave her an envelope to place the butterfly inside of it. However, the envelope nor the butterfly was ever located. An extensive search took place for Janice. It was possibly one of the biggest searches in Connecticut history, with over 800 people looking for Janice. However, no evidence of her whereabouts was found. Janice's sister says it's pretty obvious to her that Janice was abducted, and it's also pretty obvious, according to her, that the abductor used a car to abduct Janice. She also mentioned on the radio show that I've listened to that back in the day, the town of Tolland, or let's say Tolland's police, did not have experience dealing with such cases. So the crime scene wasn't handled properly. I even believe she mentioned that their father actually took the bicycle that Janice was riding back home, as he didn't want someone to steal the bike. Obviously, in this day and age, no one would even touch the bike because the bike has most likely vital DNA that could lead to an arrest. But back in 73, these precautions were not taken. Law enforcement had no idea of who could have taken Janice, but they have a few suspects in mind. Authorities have named Charles Pierce as a suspect in her disappearance. I've done some research on Charles Pierce, and mainly I've read about him on the murderpedia.org. This is a very nice website with a lot of information regarding serial killers, molesters, and people of that nature. So Charles Pierce, his classification is child killer because he has been charged of killing a girl. I think we'll definitely get into it very soon. I just want to keep the the structure correct here. He is also his characteristics include necrophilia. The number of victims that this man potentially has is in the range from 1 to 3, and let's get into why he was charged in the first place and how does Charles Pierce potentially connect to Janice. Charles Pierce is a vicious killer. He was sentenced to 20 years in prison for the 1969 murder of Michelle Wilson, a 13-year-old girl from Boxford. In that case, Charles Pierce had accosted her as she rode her bicycle home from a friend's house, then dragged her into his van and strangled her. He had sex with her dead body and took her to some woods where he bit her, beat her, kicked her in the head, put a 98-pound rock on her head, and covered her with leaves. Now, Charles Pierce is a real psycho. I want to quickly read what I see regarding this man on murderpedia.org. It's a very good article. I would suggest anyone interested in finding out more, please go there and read up on this guy. A glimpse into Pierce's twisted psyche is provided by the state police detective captain who arrested Pierce in the Wilson's case. About 10 years after the murder, Pierce confessed and led investigators to the spot where he put the body. The captain, who declines to be named, was sitting in the back seat of a police van with Pierce at the crime scene. At the time, Pierce was suspected in several child murders and also had active tuberculosis. A big moon came out and it was shining into the back seat, the captain says. And I'm trying to get Charlie, referring to Charles Pierce, to tell me where some of the children he killed are, saying it would be nice to let the parents know that much. Charlie said, "There are so many." So I said, well, how about if we start with the ones in Massachusetts? Just then, clouds blocked the moon. He turned to me and started spitting on me so I'd get his tuberculosis, and he hit me over the head with his handcuffs and said, "You no good." He rambled on, calling me other names, and from then on, he wouldn't say anything more to me or Dougie, another police officer. For the sake of not losing the main topic of this episode, which is the Vernon-Tolland Three, I want to quickly, explain in my words how Charles Pierce potentially connects to Janice. So we are pretty sure that Charles Pierce has murdered Michelle Wilson, another 13-year-old girl from Boxford, in 1969, but he had only confessed to the killing in 1979, which is 10 years later. So as mentioned before, Mr. Pierce was arrested for the Michelle Wilson killing 10 years later. And this actually happened when he was in prison in Florida, where he was about to begin serving another 10 years for sexual assaults on 3 boys in a Tampa suburb. Florida authorities agreed to let him return to Massachusetts, I believe, to serve time, and Mr. Pierce was connected to the case by statements he made to another inmate and the medical staff at the Florida prison. So he was about to serve 10 years for another unrelated case when he told an inmate and apparently medical staff of what he had done to Michelle Wilson, and then later in 1980 he officially confessed to killing Michelle. He got hit with a life sentence, and once that happened, he had confessed to killing, I believe in particular, Janice Pockett. And he later on started confessing to a lot more killings. Charles Pierce told investigators he was responsible for 15 to 20 child murders since 1954. He names several children, including William DeSouza of Chicago, as well as previously mentioned Janice Pockett and Mary Catherine Olenchuk of Maine, among others. Investigators have found no evidence that Charles Pierce was actually involved in Janice's disappearance. But the modus operandi would have been quite similar, because Michelle Wilson was also riding a bike, just as Janice. Michelle was a little bit older, but once again, the similarities of at least the modus operandi are quite similar. Alright, let's jump to the other publicly known suspect in the Janice Pockett's disappearance, who is Nathaniel Barjona. He was a convicted felon who was serving a 130 years prison sentence without the possibility of parole in Montana, after being convicted of kidnapping, aggravated assault, and sexual assault of various children. I don't believe this guy has ever been charged for actually killing anyone, just for those previously mentioned crimes. Alright, so these are my notes regarding this guy. He is believed to have raped and murdered multiple children throughout his life. He is also considered a possible suspect in the 1978 disappearance of Andrew Amato, the 1996 Montana abduction of Zachary Ramsey, as well as the 1997 Wyoming disappearance of Amanda Gallion. Nathaniel Barjona was named as a suspect in Janice's case in the year of 2000. In that year, investigators had found bone fragments of a child buried 6 feet underneath his dirt-floored garage in Montana. Now, speaking about those bones, the bone fragments were not those of Zachary Ramsey for sure, because of DNA testing. Now, Janice's and Amanda's family sent their DNA for comparison to the remains, but they also did not match, meaning that we know for a fact that these remains didn't belong to Janice. Investigators also believe that Barjona was involved in cannibalism. Human hair was found in a meat grinder at his home. It did not belong to any of his possible missing victims. The reason why investigators have questioned his possible involvement in Janice's apparent abduction was since he grew up and lived in Webster, Massachusetts at the time, and Webster is only 20 miles away from Tolland, where Janice Pockett lived. Now, according to the timeline, Nathaniel would have been 16 years of age when Janice disappeared. That's quite young, but at this time he had already strangled a former playmate. So it's believed he was vicious enough even at that young age to commit such a crime. Nathaniel Barjona also served a prison sentence for the abduction and attempted murder of two boys from Massachusetts in 1977. He was also found guilty of 2 counts of child molestation in Montana back in 2002. In December of 2001, a handwritten list by Barjona surfaced. It was titled Lake Webster, and it included the names of multiple alleged victims of his. I've tried finding this list, and I'm not really sure if Janice's name is on that list. Nathaniel Barjona died of a blood clot in Montana prison in 2008. He was 51 years of age when he died. He was never charged with any wrongdoing in Janice's case, and there's no evidence suggesting that he was actually involved. At the time Janice Pockett disappeared, she was wearing navy blue shorts with an imprinted American flag and star design, a blue and white striped pullover shirt. She was also wearing white socks and blue sneakers. Some of Janice's distinguishing characteristics include that she was a white female, she had blonde hair and blue eyes. Janice also had a gap between her front teeth. Let's jump to the third girl, who is the last one of the Vernon-Tolland Three. This is 13-year-old Lisa White, who went missing on November 1st, 1974. So just about a year after Janice Pockett, and around 6 years later, after Debbie Spickler. Lisa White went missing on November 1st, 1974, after walking home from a friend's house. Now, the night before she disappeared, she actually had been arrested for underage drinking, and following that, her parents grounded her. The NBC Connecticut story details that Lisa and a group of her friends actually hurled a pumpkin from a car's window on Interstate 84, and I would assume that this actually led to her getting, detained by law enforcement, right? The next day, after her mother went to work at 4:30 p.m., she sneaked out to visit a friend on Prospect Street in Rockwell, Connecticut, 2 miles away from her home. Now, following the visit, at around 7:30 p.m., so around 3 hours later, Lisa began walking back home from the friend's house. Now, she never arrived and has never been heard from again. Lisa had left a note for her mother saying that she was in love with another boy and her quote is, quote, "You think I'm a little girl, but I'm not," end quote. According to her sister, she was actually associated with some older boys and some men, in fact. In a story from NBC Connecticut, her sister April says that she had a boyfriend who was somewhere around 18 at the time. So I just found it a little bit creepy how an 18-year-old boy is like dating a 13-year-old girl. I definitely feel like that's not that good, you know what I mean, guys? Strangely enough, I don't really have any more information regarding this boyfriend, and according to the previously mentioned information, this guy would be the main suspect, right? The police contacted the youth divisions of the Manchester and East Hartford police departments and the runaway drop-off center in Hartford. Even 4 days later, law enforcement still doubted that Lisa actually had been kidnapped, and at that time they believed that she was a runaway. When days turned to weeks and still no trace of Lisa could be found, police began to suspect foul play was involved. Lisa's disappearance was one of 5 in a 10-year period in the Vernon area, including Janice Pockett as well as Debbie Spickler. All of the missing were females. They ranged in ages from 7 to 20. 2 of them were found deceased years after their disappearance, but the other 3, including Lisa White, remain missing. It's not clear whether these cases are actually related. Till this day, Lisa's disappearance remains unsolved. At the time of her disappearance, she was wearing green pants and a blue denim jacket. Lisa's distinguishing characteristics include that she was a white female, she had blonde hair and blue eyes. Lisa has a small pockmark on her forehead above her right eye. She was in a very good physical condition as well. At the time of her disappearance, she danced and did acrobatics. Her teeth are in perfectly aligned position due to previous use of orthodontic braces. As you guys can recall, I mentioned previously that there were in total 5 missing females in the 10-year period, so the other 2 victims mentioned previously who were actually found deceased were, the first one was 20-year-old Suzanne LaRosa, who disappeared in 1975 after she left her apartment in downtown Rockwell to go to a drugstore in order to call her mother. Now, she went missing in very close proximity to the area that Lisa White vanished from the year previously. Suzanne's skeletal remains were found a few years later. Her murder remains unsolved till this day. The other girl that was found deceased was Patricia Lucy or Luce, and this happened back in 1976. She was 18 and she disappeared after she asked her older brother to drop her off at the 7-Eleven store on Route 38. I believe this was also in Rockwell, so close proximity. These 3 last cases, Lisa White, Suzanne LaRose, and Patrice Luce. And this was actually not far from her home as well, this 7-Eleven where she was dropped off by her brother. She remained missing for nearly a year until her body was discovered, and once again her murder is also unsolved. The Vernon-Tolland Three have never been found, and while Nathaniel Barjona is named as a suspect in Janice Pockett's case, police haven't named any suspects for Debbie Spickler and Lisa White cases. No physical evidence has ever been identified in any of these 3 cases. The only piece of evidence which was located in Janice Pockett's disappearance was her bicycle, which was unable to be processed for DNA. The cold case squad that was formed in 2014 October meets as a group monthly and has uncovered dozens of leads and tips with thousands of old documents to review and electronically scan. As part of their evidentiary search, they are most interested in obtaining any photos or videos taken during the summer of 1968 in the location of Henry Park in Vernon, Connecticut, particularly depicting landscape and people in the background at events occurring in the park where Deborah Spickler went missing. So from this I'm gauging that, the cold case squad is probably trying to find or look at people who were hanging around the swimming pool from which Debbie Spickler disappeared. And let's remember that Debbie was the first one of the Vernon-Tolland Three to disappear, and she disappeared on July 24th of 1968. I found an interesting article online where the state attorney of Tolland, Matthew Gdansky, talks a little bit about this case. Also, he was apparently hanging posters describing these three infamous cases, cold cases, during the annual National Night Out celebration in Rockville in 2019. Essentially, Matthew Gdansky was trying to spread awareness for these, Vernon-Tolland Three disappearances. So the veteran prosecutor offered court advice to many visitors, but also fielded questions and listened to comments about the cases. Now, he came to work the next day, I think it was a Wednesday morning, and had a voicemail. It was yet another eerie tip. It was from somebody who was sexually assaulted in 1970s. The caller also provided the name of the culprit. Now, State Attorney Gdansky said he added this name to the long list of notes on suggested culprits in these three cases. He also added that many of the tips involve different names from towns like Vernon, Tolland, and Ellington. Just wanted to share the screen, my computer screen as well. For this episode, mainly we're looking at the map right now. And as you can see, guys, there are a lot of different area points in the map. So I won't do an in-depth analysis of the map, like let's say we did it on the last week's episode. I just want to quickly go through these points so that I guess you, the audience members, would have like a better understanding of like distances and things like that. So let's zoom in where the Vernon-Tolland Three case happened. So this is the general area where the disappearances took place, and to help us differentiate from cases, Janice Pockett's case area points are marked in the red color, while let's see, Debbie Spickler's case points are marked in yellow, as we can see, and Lisa White's points are marked in blue. So I guess we can just look, once again, another thing is these area points are not 100% accurate, but they're in the general area where they happen. So we could start with, I think, Debbie Spickler, because as we know, she is the first one of the girls who disappeared back in '68. So this is actually the pool. We actually have the pool where she went missing from, well, allegedly from here, because when her female cousin came back, she couldn't find her. I'm actually looking at the street. We're actually looking at the street view of the general area, at least now. Obviously, this is not how this place looked like in 68, but at least right now, it looks like a pretty nice park. You wouldn't probably expect this to be a dangerous park for kids. We can see that the pool is still here. It still seems to be here and seems to be operational. Now, we have Fox Hill Drive right here because this is the road that Debbie and her female cousin were walking to get to the pool. Okay, let's zoom out a little bit and let's go to Janice Pockett's area point. So this is generally the town of Tolland, I would assume, somewhere around here where I have highlighted on the Google map. Now, I don't have the exact location where Janice disappeared from, but these are the roads, and I think, well, according to the timeline, her bike was found somewhere in the Rhodes Road. Do we have a street? Yeah, we actually have a street view as well, so we can take a quick peek. It's definitely a wooded area for everyone who's listening to this. This is a heavily wooded area. And Janice was driving here alone for the first time ever. 7-year-old Janice was driving alone, and according to her sister, she's pretty certain that Janice was kidnapped by someone, and that someone was using a car to do the kidnapping. And I guess we can go back to that same area in Rockwell, well, close to Rockwell, where Lisa Y disappeared from. And once again, now we can see that these disappearances, Lisa's disappearance and Debbie's disappearance, are a lot closer to one another from Janice's disappearance, because Janice disappeared in a different town, or at least in a different town from Vernon, but the town is in very close proximity nonetheless. Let's go through some other points. So I've marked Ellington as a point of interest, I guess, because State Attorney Matthew Gdansky said that some of the tips are coming in from Ellington. This is Vernon. Once again, Vernon is the place where, well, the town that Lisa lived in. The last of the three girls who disappeared. She was living there, and the first girl who disappeared, essentially Debbie was visiting her aunt here, because Debbie was originally from Mystic, and as we can see a little bit down south, this is Mystic. This is the town where Debbie was from, and that interesting point where, let's remember that interesting point where Debbie's mother received some sort of a birthday card, right, from Debbie on the same day when she vanished. And this is Webster. As we can see, this is Webster, and this is apparently only 20 miles away from where Janice disappeared. And this is where Nathaniel Barjona was living. And back in 73, Nathaniel was 16. And he had already done some creepy stuff. So I've looked into a little bit about this Nathaniel Barjona. He's a really creepy guy. He was, I think, the earliest the first time he tried to kill someone was maybe like when he was 7. I don't want to lie here, but like something like that. And like the other kid's mother ran and saved that kid, because Nathaniel Barjona was like already trying to kill people at like age 7. So we definitely think that by age 16, this kid was like a big, like heavy kid, you know what I mean? Like a lot to deal with. So I wouldn't put it past him. But now looking at the map, for a 16-year-old to travel all the way to Tolland, which is, it's not that far away, but for a 16-year-old, that's kind of far away. I don't know, guys, let me think. Do you think this is far-fetched that Nathaniel Barjona could have traveled the apparently 20 miles to a different state? Let's remember that he would have to cross the Connecticut state line to get to where Janice Pockett was playing, and then Janice Pockett, let's remember, went missing 20 minutes into being left alone. So the pocket of time would be very, like, it would be very, let's put it this way, very convenient, right, for Nathaniel to just run into Janice for those brief 20 to 30 minutes that she was left unaccounted for. And we can go a little bit to the northeast, and these are the points mainly related to Charles Pierce. Remember Charles Pierce? That guy who was convicted for murdering Michelle Wilson back in 1969. So this is Michelle Wilson. She was actually snatched up as she was riding her bicycle by Charles Pierce in Mill Road, and this is approximately where it happened. Once again, she was from Boxford, so from this local area, I would assume. I would assume Charles Pierce was, well, I don't know if he was living in the area of Lawrence, Massachusetts, but he did confess to killing another boy, but he didn't name who the boy was. Because he was, once he got the life sentence, Charles Pierce confessed to killing specifically Janice Pockett and then another unidentified boy from Lawrence. And law enforcement believe that he may have been referring to, if it was not, a lie, that he may have been referring to Andy Puglisi. And Andy Puglisi disappeared in a very similar fashion to how Debbie Spickler disappeared, because Andy also disappeared from a public pool. So both of these, I didn't really investigate how the pools looked like. And once again, Debbie disappeared in 68 while Andy disappeared in 76. So that's 8 years apart, but also from a public pool. So if we can actually somehow connect Charles Pierce to Janice, it would make it easier for us to connect Charles Pierce to Debbie as well, because, well, obviously we would still have to connect Charles Pierce to Andy, so there's a lot of connecting to do here. We're looking at Debbie Spickler's poster. Once again, we can see the age progression picture as well. This is Janice Pockett's missing persons poster. As you can see on the right hand side, we also have a age progressed picture also. We're now looking on the YouTube channel at the bike. Now I'm not really sure if this is the real crime scene picture from Janice Pockett's disappearance, because I believe, well, according to Janice Pockett's younger sister, their father took this bike home for safekeeping because he was afraid that someone would steal it. Obviously, that was a blunder, but he couldn't have known because it was 73, so DNA probably wasn't that big in 73. So the first thought in your mind is not to preserve evidence, but to preserve your property, preserve the bike itself. And we have another picture of this bike. Now it's falling down. The other one was standing still. This one that we're looking at, the bike is already falling down. I'm not quite sure what to make of it. I think it was a situation where the mother, Janice's mother, she actually placed a stone at the area where she found the bike. So essentially what happened was the father took the bike for safekeeping, but then to remember exactly where the location of the bike was, Janice's mother actually placed some sort of a big stone in the area, which was a pretty smart thing for her to do, you know what I mean, in the moment. And I think maybe they returned this bike later on to kind of set the stage, because I don't think anyone was taking these pictures. We're looking at some pictures, and I definitely I would assume that they did not took these pictures. So I would assume that these are not real crime scene pictures from Janice Pockett's case, and maybe they are just, staged after the fact. But I do believe that the bicycle is probably the original one that Janice was riding. And also we're looking at Lisa White's pictures. So this is the girl that disappeared last from the Vernon-Tolland Tree. And we have a few images here of her, but now this image was very interesting to me because I did not know this. So this is a image where Lisa White and Patrice Luce, that other girl who was found killed and her murder is unsolved, are in the same picture. This is some sort of a cheerleader picture. So Lisa White and Patrice Luce, they were probably at the same age because you can see this is Lisa White right here and this is Patrice Luce. So, out of all of those 5 girls that disappeared from the general Vernon area in the 10-year span, Patrice Luce, she was found dead and her murder is still unsolved, and Lisa White is still missing. But they actually had some sort of a connection. That's kind of bizarre, you know what I mean? Do we think that this connection has something to do with Lisa's disappearance and Patrice's murder? Have they been targeted? I would probably say that this is highly unlikely. This is probably just a coincidence. Let me know what you think, guys. Speaking about Patrice Luce, I found this image of her. This is another image of Patrice Luce. The quality is not that good, but I found this and I was intrigued. I uncovered this thing. I think it's some sort of a police poster. For everyone who's listening to this, I'm gonna try to describe what we see here. I believe this is a police poster, but maybe this is a police internal poster so that other officers would know what to look for on the road. Maybe these are like for the patrolling officers. And I'm just gonna quickly read it because I'm not sure if on YouTube it's gonna be readable. So I wanna quickly read that. Basically, what we're looking at is a sketch of a man, and then next to that sketch is a car, right? And there's a little write-up beneath. Okay, and the write-up goes, "We are investigating the disappearance of Patricia Luce, aged 18, a white female, 5'7" tall, 135 pounds, brown hair and hazel eyes. Miss Luce was last seen on July 18th, 1978, at about 9 p.m., walking towards her home in Vernon, Connecticut. We are seeking to identify a white male about 25 years old who may have important information in this case. The artist drawing above is believed to be a good likeliness of the white male we seek. He is believed to be the owner and/or operator of a black or dark colored Thunderbird vehicle, similar to that pictured above. It is requested that this matter be brought to the attention of all patrolmen and detectives, and that patrolmen be alerted to watch for and report male subjects with similar facial characteristics and vehicles. Any person having information, contact the Connecticut State Police Department toll free at the number, yada yada, whatever. So this is pretty interesting. I believe we have a suspect in at least Patricia Luce's case. Now, I don't know much about this, and I haven't really looked into it, but at least we have something, right? I found someone on Reddit who made a pretty nice post regarding the situation in the Vernon. This is more about like the Vernon 5, not necessarily Vernon 3, not the Vernon-Tolland Three, but including the other two girls, Suzanne LaRosa and Patricia Luce, just the one that I've just talked about. And I guess it gave me a little bit more information regarding Suzanne LaRosa. So she was apparently mother of 3, and her husband was initially suspected, but he was ruled out. And then Patricia Luce, the interesting fact that I uncovered, and then later I found that cheerleading picture that Patricia Luce in the late 60s, she was on a cheerleading team with Lisa White, so is there a connection? I mean, I'm not really sure. And this is Charles Pierce, the crazy guy who was spitting at the law enforcement trying to give his tuberculosis to other people. Like, you can see from this guy's face, this guy is a real menace. I see this guy, I want nothing to do with this guy. This guy looks like he would like pull out a gun and just like start shooting people at the mall or something like that. And this is a missing person from Andy Puglisi. If you recall, we talked about Andy Puglisi. He was potentially also connected to Charles Pierce, but we're not really sure. And he went missing from a public pool, similarly to Debbie. And this is the image of Michelle Wilson. As we can recall, she is the murder victim. She was killed in '69. She was 13. She was riding her bike, and Charles Pierce killed her. And they got Charles 10 years later, and once they handed him down the life sentence, he confessed to killing Janice Pockett. And an unidentified boy in the town of Lawrence in Massachusetts, law enforcement believe it could have been this kid, Andy Puglisi, but we're not really certain. And lastly, we have the images of Nathaniel Barjona. And look at this guy. This is Nathaniel Barjona when he was a kid, and he was already like, molesting other kids as a kid. So he's crazy, and just look at this guy. And he kind of looks insanely creepy. So this kid did some crazy stuff. And you can actually look him up, like Nathaniel Barjona. He was a real character. And some of his later images are also not that great, you know what I mean? In conclusion, I would like to say that I'm not really sure if these three girls, the Vernon-Tolland Three, are connected, but it is very suspicious that all of them went missing from around the Vernon area, and well, Janice went missing from the Tolland area, which is still fairly close to Vernon. I believe that everything is possible in this case, and for me to make some sort of a better assessment whether or not there is a connection or there is a potential serial killer that was lurking back in the Vernon, Connecticut area back in the late 60s, all throughout the 70s, I would have to dig a lot more into the individual cases. Please let me know what you guys think. Is there a connection in your opinion? And any sort of feedback in the comment section of the YouTube channel is always appreciated. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I will catch you on the next episode. Stay safe and peace out.